Hello and welcome to my tutorial on the infinite wave system. This tutorial is divided into two parts. This part will include an already fully functional but simple wave system. In the next part we will expand and improve this system with many functions. And before we get to coding, let's first take a look at what the system is capable of. Before I do that, I will briefly explain the UI. Provisional, I have all enemies display their data in the UI so that we can see that they are getting stronger and stronger from wave to wave. The wave data is also displayed in the UI, so we can see that from wave to wave more and more opponents spawn. All data can of course be set individually. Here we see how many enemies are already spawned. Next you will see how many enemies need to be spawned. Finally it shows how many opponents are currently alive. Above this we see in which wave we are. On the right side we see how much time we have left until the next wave starts. Above this is a button to skip this time. In the enemy UI the attack strength, the speed, the life and the multiplier for each opponent is displayed. So and now we move on to the functions. As we can see, each wave more enemies spawn. These are also getting stronger and stronger. Also from certain waves other opponents spawn than in other waves. In addition there is a break between each wave that you can skip. All data is adjustable. Now the opponents die when they get close to the player. In a game, of course, it would look different. All UI scripts as well as the enemy scripts do not belong to the wave system and are only for visualization. These scripts are only shown but not explained. However, you can also download them. In general, these are also very easy to understand. Since they are also not part of the tutorial, the code is correspondingly bad, because it was programmed quickly. Only a small part of the enemy script is needed and because of this also explained. We start by creating a new script called Wave System in Unity and opening it immediately. After we have opened Visual Studio, we start immediately by making our script accessible from anywhere. We do this by creating a public static instance of this class and set it to this in the awake method. The attributes such as headers and space are only for beauty and are not explained. Now let's start with the variables. The integer current wave indicates which wave we are in. The float spawn multiplier indicates by what percentage the number of opponents changes to each wave, and the float strength multiplier does the same with the strength of the opponents. The integer start summons indicates the amount of opponents to be spawned in the first wave, and the integer current summons is the number of opponents to be spawned in the current wave. The integer summon spawned indicates how many enemies were already spawned. The integer current summons alive says how many opponents are currently alive, and the integer current summons dead says how many opponents have already died in this wave. Finally, there is a variable called current mark summons once, which says how many opponents are allowed to live in the current wave at most at the same time. For this variable we also create a start value called start max summons once. Next comes a float called start strength that indicates how strong the multiplier is for the strength of the opponents in the first wave. Then comes the float called current strength, which indicates the total multiplier for the current wave. Next we come to the time settings. We need a float that indicates how much time you have between the waves. I call it time between waves here. Then we need a float that indicates when the last wave ended. I call this float time and last wave. Next we need a boolean that indicates if a wave is running. I call this boolean wave is running. Next we come to the spawn point settings. First of all we need a list of possible spawn points for the opponents. Then we need a reference to the opponent container in which we spawn the opponents. Finally we come to the enemy settings. So we need a list that resonates with all different opponents. In addition we need a list that says which opponents can be spawned in the current wave. Finally we need a list that includes all the selected opponents for the current wave. I have taken a list of enemy base components here. If you already have an enemy script, then use this one. Next we take care of the start method. Here we set the current wave to 0. In the same way we put all summoned opponents, all living and all dead to 0. We set the other current values to their start values. So basically we reset all the variables. Now we finally call the next wave method, which we also create but leave empty for the time being. Next we call the Waveloop method, which we now program in the update method. In this method, the entire sequence of the wave system is regulated. In the Waveloop method, we ask whether a wave is already running or not. If not, we ask if there has been already been enough time for a new wave or not. If enough time has passed, we start a new wave by setting the boolean wave is running to true. If a wave is already running, we ask if all enemies to be spawned are already spawned. If not all of them are spawned, we ask if there are not more enemies alive than allowed at the moment. If that's the case, we spawn new enemies by calling the spawnEnemy method. We will program this method afterward. If all of them are already spawned, we ask if all of them are dead. If this is the case, we will start a new wave with the next wave method from earlier. And that's it, our wave loop is ready. Now we are moving on to our spawnEnemy method. Here we start by generating a random spawn point. So we create a transform object, spawn point, and a random integer between 0 and the number of spawn points. Then we set our spawn point to the spawn point, which is in our spawn point list below our random index we just generated. After that, we spawn our enemy with the instantiate method. As an enemy, we take the enemy, which is at the selected enemy list, with the index of our already spawned enemy count. We also set the parent to our enemy holder. After that, we set our multiplier variable from our enemy script to our current strength variable. That way our enemy gets stronger. If you don't have such a variable in your enemy script, just add it as a float to your script. Next, I call my adjustEnemy-to-wave method in my enemy script. I will show you this method afterwards and explain it. At the end of the spawnEnemy method, we increase our current summons alive and summon spawn variable. And that's it, our spawnEnemy method is ready. So now I will show you my enemy script. The only relevant part here is my multiplier variable, as well as the available from wave and the available to wave variable. You can just copy them. The multiplier we need to multiply the speed, attack and health variable from my enemy script. The variable from wave variables tell us from which wave this enemy can spawn. The variable to wave variable says up to which wave this enemy can spawn. Now I show you my adjustEnemy wave method. As you can see, it just sets my variables to their start value and after that sets it to their start values multiplied by our multiplier. The only last thing you also need to add to your enemy script is the die method. If you already have one, just adjust it. Here we just add 1 to our current summons dead variable from our wave system script and take 1 away from our current summons alive variable. And that was everything we need to do in our enemy script. Now let's move back to our wave system script. We continue with the new wave method. Here we first have to set wave is running to false and increase the current wave variable by 1. We also set time at last wave to now, or in other words, to time point time. Then we multiply our two current multipliers by their starting values. Now we reset our three variables, current summons alive, summons spawned and current summons dead, just as in our start method, so we just set them to 0. Now we generate our available enemy list. To do this, we first reset the list with the clear method. Then we loop through our enemy container and add all enemies that we can spawn in this wave to the available enemy list. Finally, we generate our selected enemy list. To do this, we first clear 2. Then we loop through with a for loop with the number of current summons. In the for loop, we then add the return of the getRandomEnemy method to the selected enemy list. In the getRandomEnemy method, we have an enemy instead of a void as a return. Inside, we ask if our available enemy list has any content at all. At the end of the method, we then return 0. If the available enemy list has content, we generate a random integer between 0 and the count of the available enemy list. Finally, we return the enemy in the available enemy list under the random index we just generated. And that's it. Now we only need the skip pause method that you can put onto a button to skip the time between the waves. In the skip pause method, we just set the boolean wave is running to true. And that's it. We completely finished with our code. Now we're going back to Unity. Here we put our script on an object. I put it onto my GameManager object. Now, if you use the same attributes as me, it should look something like this. On the right side, you can set everything. Don't forget to add your spawn point objects from your scene to the spawn points list. In addition, add all enemies to the enemy list by making prefabs out of them. in advance. You can make prefabs by drag and drop objects into your folders. My finished setup looks like this. Also, if you have a button to skip the time between the waves just like me, don't forget to add this method to the on-click event from the button. And that's it, you can test your system now. If you have any problems or questions, please write them in the comments. As I said, the UI script and other things do not belong to the system, but I will now show you the scripts. However, I would not recommend you to copy them, because they are not efficient and only for representation. So this is my UI wave script. This just updates the for text field which you saw in Unity before to the data from the wave system. This is my enemy script which I also showed before. It just has speed variable, attack variable and start values for this too. Also I have a living entity script which I show you now. So this is my living entity script which the enemy is iterating from. It just have a health variable and a starts and max variable for this health, and some methods to adjust the variables and automatically die if you have 0 left, for example, and it also clamps the current health to the max health. And yeah, the last script I have is the player script, which basically just have this code, so the enemies can access this object and move towards it. And yeah, that was it. I would be very happy about a like and a subscription. In addition, turn on the bell so you don't miss new tutorials. I hope I see you in the next part, where we expand the functions of this system. Finally, I wish you a nice day and until next time. Bye.